Hello once again, and welcome to Herr Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botzer. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back onto the show Mr. Dave Atherton. Dave is a political analyst and then some. He is probably the best, if not one of the best, let's not get him too big-headed, Twitter pages in the United Kingdom. He's always on the money and you'll hear from things that you won't get anywhere else. And he's certainly not Ofcom regulated tonight. Without further ado, let me say, Dave, how are you, sir?
That's very good, Marcus. Thanks I'm very well, and thanks a lot for inviting me on the show again. Always a pleasure.
It's always great to have you on. We've been going for just over a year now, and you were one of the first people that we wanted to come onto the show, and it's probably a lot to do with your X page. I'd seen you on Talk TV and a few other platforms like that, but constantly you always find cases where illegal migrants posing as asylum seekers are committing crimes in this country. We see record numbers already under Labour. I think it's double the amount in their first 3 months that we saw in the Tories' 6 months. So looking at the trajectory, you're talking maybe 100,000 people after their first full year in charge. Starmer doesn't look like smashing the gangs at all. Not that that was ever going to work. But do we need to start talking about deportations now seriously and put it front and centre of the agenda?
It's amazed me how much the Overton window has shifted to the right. You know, we can now openly openly say immigration should be reduced. We can talk about the crimes of migrants, which are aplenty. By the way, if you want a very quick back of a fag packet calculation, I reckon for every 20,000 migrants we absorb into this country, will have one extra murder, and for every 500 migrants we absorb, male migrants, we will expect to have at least one more allegation of rape. I've done it based on figures from Germany, Switzerland, and France. Percentage of for example, I think it's in France. Someone from the Maghreb countries in North Africa are 4 times more likely to commit rape than French-born citizens, and so therefore there was one allegation of rape in Britain per 1,000 people last year. That's 1 per 1,000. So they're 4 times more likely, to commit rape. You're talking about there will be one allegation of rape per 250 women.
I mean, it's unbelievable. You've spoken to us about the Danes. And the Danes are actually on top of measuring the demographics and who's committing the crimes, whereas in this country, there seems to be absolutely no interest in recording how many illegal migrants are committing crimes. Is that because they're embarrassed?
Yeah, I think that's basically the bottom line. It's one of the questions I'm going to ask somebody who I did mention previously. Does the Home Office actually keep this data? But it would be incendiary and far too embarrassing if they released it to the public. The only clue we have is one of the clues we do have. There was a freedom of information request to Dorset. Dorset with towns like Bournemouth, obviously, a magnet for hotels and where they can put asylum seekers. In the last 10 years, there's been a 4-fold increase in rape. 4-fold. You could put some of that down to that we're a little bit more confident about reporting these the rapes to the police. There might be some other minor reasons as well, but you have to come to the reasonable conclusion that the vast majority it is the importation of often Muslim people with backward 7th century ideas, and backward savages and Stone Age barbarians who have no respect for women. And then they come. There's also something I read in the Guardian. I found confirmation from the Guardian. I wish I bloody kept it. But there is a perception in the Middle East that European women are always dying for sex. Now they might be. There might be a kind of a bit of a self delusion there, but their attitude towards women who wear sleeveless dresses and mini skirts and things like that are impure, and because they're non-Muslim due to the Quran chapter 4 verse 24, they are open season for Muslim people, taken as its literal interpretation. So moving on to what you're saying about deportations, it's an open goal. Any illegal immigrant, should be immediately rounded up and put on the first boat out of this country. People think there's probably somewhere around 1 million. I think there's probably a lot more. And so that's a start. I think every single boat migrant that comes over here, unless they got a particularly strong documented sob story, they should also be immediately deported. It's not a case of they spend 5 years playing the system with appeal after appeal. They should be thrown out of the country at the earliest opportunity. If it means giving them a Royal Naval escort back to Calais or Dunkirk ports, so be it.
Why do you think with Operation Early Dawn that happened last month, why do you think that the 1,500 prisoners that were released, Dave, none were actually foreign prisoners who were deported back to their own countries? Why was that?
Well, this is it. We're hamstrung. We're hamstrung by the European Court of Human Rights legislation. We're hamstrung by lefty lawyers, and we're hamstrung by a civil service that has no will to end mass immigration from the third world. And I really hope, and let's name and shame Sir Matthew Rycroft, who's the permanent secretary at the Home Office. He was to my mind, he was a traitor to this country, and he is laying down the roots of our civilizational destruction. I'm looking at thinking ahead. There seems to be no end to the pain that we're having from immigration. I can never see it end. The only time I can see mass immigration from the third world coming to Britain ending is when we become as poor as the third world countries they came from.
It has to get to that stage.
Yeah, I really, the current trajectory, yes, and quite frankly, if we have to declare a state of emergency, and we have, I want to live in a Western liberal enlightened democracy, but unfortunately, the current establishment are not letting me do that. And quite frankly, if we got to declare a state of emergency and override the ECHR and British law for a certain amount of time to regain control of our borders, so be it.
We've overridden ECHR laws in the past, and other European countries are doing it as we speak. Germany are closing their borders, which is in breach of the Schengen Agreement. But no one's batting an eyelid. So it's funny you mentioned traitorous. And let's just say, for the legality of it, traitorous behaviour.
The
last man to be hung in this country was Lord Haw for traitorous acts. And moving on a little bit to the Profumo scandal, we saw Jack Profumo resign in disgrace because he had a dalliance with a call girl,
Christine Keeler and
Mandarace Davis. Now, that was Profumo resigned just because of the alleged conflict of interest in that he was bedding a call girl who was being bedded by a Russian spy. We've got before us today a Lord Alli's involvement in the Labour Party, just jumping a couple of subjects, where he's straddling contacts and links with Syria and Iraq. I mean, how far does this have to go before the laws are taken up against these people?
Okay. Well, let's try and break this down. Little birdie tells me, and I'm a group tried to rope me in on this one as well. Ashad, what's his name? Al-Bashir, whatever his name is, wants to improve his image in the West and in America and Europe. And I've got a bit of a tip of a wink on that one. Now, my analysis of Bashir is he's not the nicest person in the world. He may have committed atrocities. I think the chemical attack he supposedly did in Damascus, that was not 2013, 11 years ago, I think was a false flag attack. But the point is, he's secular. There is a Christian minority in the country, and I'm sure he's no worse or better than any other ruler of the Middle East. Let me tell you a story. One of my sort of jokey sort of discussions on how tyrannical a country is I start off by saying, I'm sure, Vladimir Putin. I'm sure if you wrote to Vladimir at the Kremlin and said, there's a pothole in my street. If you don't fix it, I demand you resign. He's not going to care, is he? So, but obviously there is a level whereby, if you're a multinational billionaire and you start trying to undermine him, he's going to kill you. So what I was trying to find out was where the line is. I asked a lady from Saudi Arabia, it's the jokey, you got a pothole, in your street and it's peeing you off, and you write to the Crown Prince and you complain about your pothole in the middle of the street. She said to me, you wouldn't do that. The very mere fact that you wrote and complained to the Crown Prince was out of order, and the police would come round and arrest you for it. Even something like that. This is the mentality in the Middle East. They have no concept of Western liberal democracy.
But looking at acts against the state from our elected officials, it's coming out on a daily basis. We want your views on Lord Alli. We'll push you a little bit.
Oh, okay, fine. I'd rather meander
That's all right.
to a different point. Okay. Well, I'd like to know what he was doing there. I really, really would like to know what was the purpose. Maybe from what I was saying about Bashir is trying to improve his image in the West. As I say, which I do have a little bit of inside information from. But you have to say, he's been there multiple times as well, from what I've read. Now, this is not a good look. This is not, we need a full explanation. What he was doing? Are there any notes? Are there any recordings? What was the purpose of his visit? And what have you? And using your influence, Lord Alli, what have you done since you've met him? Who have you spoken to? This needs to be out in the open, and fully recorded and documented for all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, surely MI6 would have been very interested in, and he was a Carlton TV executive at the time.
Sure.
When he went across, that one of these media hotshots is going over to a country that was viewed as a threat. Both countries continue to be viewed as threats at the time. Now he's the most influential person outside of Sue Gray that was in the United Kingdom. I mean, on a daily basis, people like Talk TV, our old friend Mike Graham, his great team, the Sun, are coming out with fantastic information, even though they get slighted because they allegedly backed Labour. We want to get your views on that as well. It's just a churning of filth, sleaze, and corruption.
Which is, isn't it? It's just one story after another. And it makes you think within certain parameters. I wouldn't say the Conservatives were squeaky clean,
no,
but far from it. But they seem to have brought higher standards into the office. In the 14 years they were in power. There's obviously that scandal about buying all the taxpayer ducks, duck boats and things like that. It's just so funny. It's Americans lapped it up, that scandal sort of thing. The abuse of taxpayer money, buying boats for ducks on ponds. Yeah, there's a boat for ducks on ponds. Yeah, but all the freebies that he gets, and probably the worst one is it was Taylor Swift getting a police escort. Okay, fine. Okay, well, the choice for Taylor Swift should have been, okay, we'll give you a police escort. Here's the bill.
But it wasn't the case. It was for favours.
Yeah, no. This is all about
breaching the ministerial code. They should have him out of office. He should be demanded that he resign because of breach after breach after breach. Sure.
Well, you obviously Boris resigned for looking at a slice of cake on his birthday in a Tupperware box. But there was Keir Starmer with a beer in his hand, and during the COVID restrictions, having a bit of a party by the looks of things. The absolute two tiers justice and standards in this country, two-tier Britain, is absolutely disgraceful. And in a way, I'm quite gratified in what's going on, Marcus, because I think this will put Labour out of power for yet another 14 years, and it's up to the Conservative Party and the Reform Party to grab the initiative and destroy the Labour Party, get rid of the Lib Dems, sort of, sort of they're kind of like the unflushable turds, aren't they? They're always lingering and smelling and and hanging around in the background. But I think Starmer's tenure has shown how appalling the party is, that they're completely bereft of ideas, completely bereft of competence, and how absolutely clueless they are, and how unfit for government they are. And all that. But as the sleaze allegations come in day by day, I sit there sort of feet up on the desk, cup of coffee in hand, and I'm enjoying this.
The handover of the Chagos Islands a couple of months after he's in office, though this was set up really by James Cleverly's office as well.
Sure.
The handover of the Chagos Islands to the Mauritians, to a point now where we're actually paying them for the use of the bases there. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And the advantage that this is going to hand over to the Chinese. Can we describe this as traitorous behaviour and an act against the state of this country?
Well, it is indeed, yes. I think when David Lammy first came across Diego Garcia, he thought it was a new signing for Spurs.
Boom.
I know.
Was that when he was on Mastermind? Henry VII. As the successor to Henry VIII.
The son of Henry VIII. Yeah. So,
God bless him.
And all who's sailing him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, fine. I'm gonna answer this question from a slightly different angle. I think, as we all know, the country isn't run by elected politicians. It's run by the civil service. And apparently, when it comes to civil service, the area to be in is the Foreign Office. That's the most prestigious place to be at. Bottom of the queue is death for agriculture. I saw a program when Boris was Foreign Secretary. I think he just recently come into the job in 2016 on BBC, and he'd flown off to the United Nations to meet delegates and glad hand people and do a bit of schmoozing. And he had a meeting with the foreign office officials in a meeting that was filmed by the BBC. This guy who was head of the mission said to Boris Johnson, "This is what you have to say." And he let the wrist out. And please don't change from it. It was a case of the foreign office official ran the Foreign Office in America rather than Boris Johnson. You can see Boris Johnson looking very irritated, and what have you. But so also, I don't think this is it is James Cleverly's incompetence, and it's also David Lammy's incompetence. But what we have in the Foreign Office is pro-China. They're scared to death of upsetting China, and so presumably, probably the Foreign Office official bullied James Cleverly into handing it over. Apparently, held 11 meetings on the subject at various times, and then the baton fell to Labour, and David Lammy, being the most un-British person in the world, was very happy to hand it over, lock, stock, and barrel. So I think that's the real story. That's my instinct. I don't know, but this is the one thing I just find so irritating about the way about government in this country. Fine. The way a government department should run, is like if you were a CEO of a company. You're in charge of policy. The elected minister should be in charge of policy, should be in charge of direction, and should be in charge of hiring and firing as well. They're not.
Dave, let's not beat about the bush. These are traitorous acts that cannot be ignored. On a daily basis, our country is being crippled.
Yeah, sure.
But the 200 billion. What were your thoughts on the 200 billion? On the chat of David Lammy, reparations for the Caribbean, 200 billion to start the ball rolling. This has been backed up even by King Charles. This has been backed up by Conservatives. I mean, Dave, where do we draw the line with these people?
Well, if I was Prime Minister, I'd turn around and say, you lot can F off, and you owe us billions of quid because we stopped it all. And by the way, if fine, okay, we'll pay you 200 billion quid and whatever figure we settle on purely on the basis that we hire a boat and take a ship and take it back to Africa.
We don't have 200 billion quid. We've got minus 3 trillion.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know. Yeah. Don't start me off. Oh, very quick aside here. Singapore has a 1.73 billion American sovereign fund. Yes. They have positive assets of 1.73 billion American dollars. Anyway, by the way,
they didn't have a chancellor that sold their gold.
No, I know.
They didn't have Gordon Brown. They must be regretting the day they didn't take him on.
No,
in Singapore.
This is the thing. This is the thing that really frustrates me. 200 billion quid. If I was Prime Minister, I'd get up the House of Commons, question time, wherever it is. Excuse me, big one. I'd say, the matter is closed. We ended slavery, and we ended slavery for much of the world. Maybe you should pay us some money with a little bit of gratitude, for what we did for you. And quite, it's the end of the matter. We're not paying you a penny. F off. That's the way I would handle it.
One could argue that slavery is still going on in the Middle East and in Africa to this day.
I should get down and do some figures on this.
Yeah.
But I certainly numerically there are more slaves today than there were in 1833 when we abolished slavery. Now, obviously, the population in 1830 was significantly smaller. But I think, for example, in India, there's 10 million slaves in India. They're basically indentured. They have to work for a person for 5 years, for example, for no pay. Then they get released from their debt and they're free to go on from there. With per capita, I don't know. But I know, for example, in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, for example, there are apps you can put on your phone if you're shopping around for a new slave. Apparently, the Middle East people use the Arabic word abd, ABD. It's Arabic for slave, and that's how they refer to their servants. Abd, come here, cup of tea, or
the caste system.
Indeed, another one of those folly things when Cameron and I forgot the American president at the time, might be Clinton, deposed Gaddafi in Libya. And it weakened the border, and that's where all those bloody migrants set out from Libya to go to Lampedusa in the Mediterranean before they're moving on to Italy. Madness. No, it's like when in 1979 Britain, France, and America were responsible for deposing the Shah of Iran because they wanted to bring down oil prices. Just keep your bloody mitts out in the Middle East and count your blessings that be like Gaddafi could keep a stable country. I won't waffle on about him, but to answer your question, we owe these people bloody nothing. And in fact, it's the other way around. They owe us a lot because if it wasn't for the British, they'd still be sort of singing "Old Man River" in chains, and
Swing low, sweet chariot.
I know, it's one of the things that about African American funerals. They're often joyous affairs, or they used to be joyous affairs. For the simple reason.
Careful, Dave. Careful.
The reason is serious.
Yes,
because. I abhor slavery. It's the most revolting thing man has invented, and the reason that African American funerals were so joyous was they were finally free of their slave master. That's the reason why.
Absolutely. Well, look on the slavery issue. This is being examined. The modern day slavery and the open borders in America are being examined by Tucker Carlson. They probably has the #1 news show in the world, apart from yourself, of course, and
Joe Rogan.
But we'll touch on that later.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan's doing it. Alex Jones is doing it as well. They're talking about the sex slave industry and especially of children. Now, we were in touch with a former border force officer who doesn't want to be named, and you can understand.
Understandably.
But he's saying there aren't any measures, and this concerns him, that actually link up the children that are being brought across by the adults. There's nothing concrete in place to say if this child without documents and this adult without documents are actually related. What information and news do you have on this?
Sure. Do you remember when President Trump was president?
Yes. Happy days.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, brouhaha that there were children that across the border from Mexico to America were putting secure accommodation. That's exactly the reason they were put in secure accommodation, because they could well have been trafficked children, and they demanded DNA tests. Indeed, yeah. And there's also, I think, around the election time of Trump in 2016, when he was on the hustings, he was talking about them raping.
Sure.
The Mexicans are raping women. It was actually based on fact. Yeah. It was. I read a New York Times article whereby a woman said she was trafficked over from Mexico, and she was raped multiple times by her traffickers. So, unfortunately, it might not sound right, but unfortunately, Donald Trump was quite right. There is abuse of women and children on a biblical scale that goes on. I'm sure it goes on here as well. I'm sure it goes. I'm sure. Sort of Romanians and and the Roma are trafficking children over here and what have we. And it's been in I've read articles in the paper as well that it has gone on.
But Dave, it's the number one industry. It's bigger. There's more money to be made in people trafficking into the UK than drugs. It's taken over.
Sure.
But if our government are asleep at the wheel on this, when do we actually say that by their complete negligence and apathy that they're connected, they're comparable?
Well, indeed. We don't have the people of ability to actually carry out these orders, and we don't have politicians that have got the gumption and the backbone to do anything about it. One of the best examples of the improvement of government, the Conservative Party boasted that 90% of schools in this country are good or outstanding. How that came about was Dominic Cummings, when he was Boris's guru.
Yeah.
He identified some problems.
Totem.
Yeah, I know. Identified problems in the civil service, in the education department, and out of 20 top officials, Dominic Cummings arranged for 15 to be sacked because they were obstructive and they didn't want to push reforms through. And he made an example to the others as well. Should you cross me? So, and what's an outstanding success for the Conservative government? We have to say, apparently, we were the fourth best in the world for reading, and we've gone about seven notches for mathematics as well. I think we're now in the top 10, for secondary school children. Now, that is a genuine success because you got rid of all those useless civil servants who are playing politics rather than wanting to improve the country.
Mm. Well, look, it remains to be seen. Obviously, people are concerned with acts against our country. Mass immigration impacts everything. Our infrastructure, our services, crime rates, and the obliteration and replacement of people in this country. How concerned are you about birth rates, Dave? And looking at the United Kingdom Indigenous people, 1.1 is the birth rate, whereas the new arrivals, God bless them, you're looking about 5 times our birth rate.
Okay, I think the figures are 1.4 for Indigenous, and I think it's 2.5 to 3 for foreigners. Actually, I think for those who have got their British passports and residency, it's actually 1.6. They're suffering as well.
Okay, well, let's say it's 3 to 1.
I know.
Right, I'll give you 2 to 1.
It's not healthy figures. Well, Marcus, sitting here in the comfort of my living room. I'm sitting here with a glass of wine. I've got my vape with me, and all I can see is the destruction of Britain and its culture. We will become like the Caribs. That's where Caribbean comes from. There is very little or no trace of the Carib civilization in the Caribbean, because they were all wiped out. They were all outbred, and they were destroyed and ethnically cleansed and things like that. I think that's what's happening in Britain. And there's, it's one of the good things about being 64. I won't see the complete and utter destruction of this country, because there is no will in this country for it to be fixed. And the only way we can fix it is using some reasonably extreme measures. And I can't see really extreme is the wrong word, but there are. I could give you a 10-point plan based partly on my knowledge of employment laws, how you could fix the problem. But I would like to see 5 to 10 million people from this country who weren't born here go. I really, really, really want to see that, because you can probably trace probably 80% of the country's problems back to immigration. House prices, probably the birth rate as well. I also think. Let me add that I think the birth rate is undermined also by left-wing ideology. It might be anecdotal, but you see the nice, pretty 16-year-old all-American girl who looks very nice, and sort of 4 years later, when she goes to university, she's got coloured hair, a ring through her nose, and looks like a raving rug muncher. I know. So I think the left have completely undermined society, particularly for younger people. I don't know if it was my paranoia, or I was taking the missus to the hospital the other day, and there were 3 white women, who were holding hands as they were walking up and down, the road that leads up to Hammersmith Tube Station.
Yeah.
One, you can say, well, okay, they might be lesbian, or they might be very good friends, or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you see 3, and they weren't your munter diesel dykes. They were actually quite pretty, attractive ladies. And it just makes you wonder, to what extent. To what extent, we have been undermined, by the Marxists.
Well, you look what's going on in the schools. We haven't even touched on the ESG, diktats that are driven into people's throats. And we've often thought about looking at the psychological aspects of this. There are obviously a massive chunk of British people that have a proclivity to being dominated, to being told what to do at every moment. Now, Stockholm Syndrome...
80% of people.
Well, yeah, it's 80%. So you and I are in the 20%, and of that 20%, how much are prepared to do this stuff? Put their necks above the parapet and take all sorts of shit that you've taken and I've taken. But it's now death or glory. Sure.
I know. I entirely agree with you. We can sort of roll over and accept our fate, and hopefully we're the last crocodile. We can fight, and we can go forward. But I just got this sneaking suspicion that it's going to be a bit tough. I think the 2029 election will be shit or bust. Excuse my French. In 2029, if we don't have a solid right-wing, motivated government, this country is finished, and it will descend into either civil war or acquiescence to Islam. That's all I can see. No, Dave, it's very depressing.
Dave, what do you think? Well, it's very depressing, unless we do something about it within the confines of what we can do. Legally, of course, we're not. Yeah. We never encourage anybody to break the laws. We're peaceful people. Now, on the deportation that we first wanted to talk to you about, Nigel Farage was interviewed by Steve Edgington. And Steve is doing a good job, and he spoke about the deportations that will be happening in America if President Trump wins. They're happening in Germany, they're happening in Denmark, they're happening in Sweden. Even the Swedes, for God's sake.
Good heavens, even the liberal Swedes, yes.
The ABBA-loving Swedes
Yes.
riding around on their bicycles naked, singing all these ABBA tunes. Well, they won't be doing that in Gothenburg. Now it's the rape capital of Europe. But
Yeah, sure.
But look, on a serious note, Nigel didn't want to talk about any deportations. Now, there's a big fear from many people that Nigel is kind of taking his eye off the ball here.
Sure.
Because even Labour are talking about it. Trump's talking about it. Why is Nigel not talking about it?
Well, if I was going to defend Nigel Farage, I'd say he's keeping his powder dry. You know, don't put your head against the parapet because you might get shot off. I have no inside information on this. I have no inside information. But I would guess he's probably keeping his powder dry. It's like post riots, the Reform Party had very little to say. It was basically it was just left up to people like ourselves to defend what was not certainly not defending physical violence. Of course, we completely condemn that. But it was, to make the case that these were not riots inspired by thuggery. That these were riots that were inspired by grievances.
But so I'll give you that if I could just interject. But the risk of keeping your powder dry, the downside to that is that you start to look apathetic towards mass immigration. You look apathetic towards doing anything about even. He didn't even want to talk about prisoners that are here. The 12,000 prisoners. He didn't even want to talk about those people that we could legally, under ECHR, we can get rid of Albanians. We can.
Sure.
It's within our gift. Yeah. The Home Office know it, the Prison Service know it, even Miss Mahmood knows it. But if you keep your powder dry for too long, it's unusable. The gunpowder won't work.
I do take your point. And where Robert Jenrick has basically sees the landscape, at least sees the landscape for himself, and he's winning a lot of fans over. And
on that note, sorry, Dave. On that note, Robert Jenrick is someone that you've spoken about in very positive terms. Obviously, you give a balanced view, which we love about you.
Sure.
And what are your thoughts now to the outcome of that, and where would you like to see the Conservatives going? Because they are at the dispatch box. Let's face it.
Sure. Right. Okay. Fine. Right. Well, it boils down to one thing.
Yeah.
Kenny Badenoch wouldn't have said she won't leave the ECHR. Robert Jenrick said he would. So I to my mind, everyone should be voting for Robert Jenrick if you're a Conservative person. I'm sure he's like the salesman who makes outlandish claims for his product. Yeah. But at least he's starting off in the right place. He might be aiming for the stars and hitting the moon, or he might be aiming for the moon and hitting the sky. But at least we've got somewhere to stay. One of the funny, it was one of those things I was talking about today, because when Giorgia Meloni in Italy came into power with a barnstorm and I'm going to sort out immigration and things like that, I thought the first few months she was a sellout who basically told lies to get into power. But I come to the conclusion that government is evolution rather than revolution. Well, and Giorgia Meloni has decreased
60% down.
Yeah, exactly. You took the figures right out of my mouth there. No problem at all. No, thanks very much. And yeah, indeed. And and she's sort of tweaking here and tweaking there, and so one hopes Robert Jenrick's going to be like that. The one question I really want to ask Robert Jenrick is, I'm bursting to ask it, is you obviously after being the immigration minister, how much that you learned from being immigration minister has influenced your stance on immigration in the leadership contest, i.e., you obviously found how shitty it was. Are you trying to fix it based on what you know?
Well, I think he resigned. At least he resigned. He didn't get the Dominic Raab treatment. He didn't get ousted out for misconduct.
Sure.
And it'll be interesting to see. I think the majority of right wingers will want to see Robert Jenrick win. I think he's got Ben Habib's backing as well, even though Ben probably doesn't really like him deep down. Sees he's a bit of a fake Farage.
Right, okay. Oh, by the way, also Kenny Badenoch is the is the love child of Doogie Smith and Michael Gove. Kenny Badenoch is the establishment choice.
Well,
Doogie Smith, he works at CCHQ.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed he's not here to defend himself. I must phone up CCHQ and ask him for a comment. Mr. Smith has been approached for comment. You're basically a CUNT, but would you like to respond to that? You're a CUNT. Apparently, Dougie Smith is the guy at CCHQ who is behind all the coups and all the problems that are going on.
Grant Shapps is backing her as well.
Well, I expect Shapps to back her because he can play nothing. Wet weekend Blackpool, that guy. I'll give you a very quick.
Grant Shapps? Have you met him?
I met him. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I was at. Let me give you an anecdote. I was at a 55 Tufton Street meeting.
This is the Conservative think tank, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, which is much loathed by the lefties. I walked in, they handed me £1 million to say something, and I walked out with another £1 million after I said the right things, when really all they offered was a cup of coffee or a can of Coke.
Yes,
and okay, so I've never been paid or received money, and then I had a Christmas party with free drinks and food, but that's not exactly corrupt.
A couple of pairs of glasses and a suit.
Exactly, yeah. And Grant Shapps was speaking at one of our meetings. He either didn't do his research, or more. What it was it was basically classical free market people who want less government and less regulation and less taxes and things like that. It was a classical liberal meeting, and Grant Shapps waffled on about the government should be doing this and the government should be doing that, and everyone sort of sat there in stony silence, rolling their eyes, And it was either two things. He either hadn't read the room or done his research, or he was turning around and saying to you, "F you," I don't care. I'm a sort of a socialist Democrat, SDP type person, and I want to use my power and tell you guys what to do. I'm pretty sure it was an FU.
But that was basically what the Conservatives did to us for 14 years, Dave. They gave us the biggest FU of all time. But look, so Jenrick's the man for you. Not perfect, but then who is? So, in conclusion, we've got some great news. Even though we've got a traitorous bunch in Keir Starmer, we call him Herr. To give him his full name, Herr Keith von Freebie Starmer. To give him his full title, the third. To give him his full title and his regime. We've got Rachel Thieves, we've got the Red Raver Rainer, and then we've got Doughboy, the Pillsbury Doughboy, David Lame Bame Lammy. So that's your little group. But on the horizon, we have the Dave Atherton, Lewis Perry, or the Lewis Perry Dave Atherton show coming up. Tell our viewers all about it, Dave, because this is going to be a beauty.
Well, you're very kind. It's Lois's idea. I can't claim any credit for it. We met at Boys Town in central London, and she was looking sparkling there as we normally expect from Lois.
Lovely.
I know. Nice, obviously a particularly nice person as well. The thinking man's crumpet. As I say,
up there with Bev Turner and Michelle Dewberry.
Yeah, indeed, yeah, and Leilani Dowding.
Oh yes! Oh, God bless Leilani. Yeah,
and all who sail there, So I know. So it was her idea, and we met at Talk TV. We were both both commentators on the show, and we get on reasonably well, and we're rather hoping to have some particularly, A grade guests on the show. I can't reveal who we got. Hopefully coming on next week. The lady who's doing the PR for the person is is getting back to me tomorrow with specific times and dates and things like that. We shall see. And
when will this be on, Dave? When will this, and where can we get this?
Okay, fine. Keep an eye on Lois's and my Twitter feed, because obviously, if you got busy people, so you can't say we're doing a show at 7 o'clock in the evening on Wednesdays, for example. Sure. You can't do that. So it might be 7 o'clock Tuesdays, 8 o'clock on Thursdays, or whatever. So keep an eye on the Twitter feed, Dave Atherton 20. And we'll keep you informed. And also we've got young James, who's our technical boffin, and who's going to be doing the arrangements. But we've got some really interesting people lined up, and I can't say too much.
I know.
Obviously at the moment, because we don't sort of embarrass somebody and let them turn around and tell us to bugger off. But people who you see on TV. People who you know come up on your Twitter feed, and what we aim to do is sort of bring a different level of conversation to the argument. One of the people we got, I tried to break down the questions into specific areas of policy and things like that. So keep an eye out for it, and we're rehearsing Friday afternoon.
You'll be sober. You'll be sober then.
Well, kind of. And Marcus, it's not easy doing this. You got to do your research. You got to write down your questions. You got to absorb the information, and then you've got to come across as being charismatic.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
Do that. You do that naturally, Dave. You really do. I've met you in person, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't done anything in your life, you have to have a drink with Dave. You really do.
Well, you have a drink with Dave, end up having 10
on the Thames, if possible, right in the middle.
Yeah, down the bridge, isn't it? Down the bridge, won't it?
It'll be sustainable. There won't be any CO2 emissions, other than the banter between us. We haven't spoke about the net zero lunacy, but we will hopefully next time, because obviously that's a big concern about our energy drain right now. I'm sure it's something that you'll cover on your show. Net zeros, I know it's a big concern of Lewis Perry's as well.
Sure, yeah. Two quickies on this one. Two quick stats. In America, they worked out that if every fossil fuel car goes EV, it will reduce world temperatures by 0.002 Fahrenheit.
Like the IPCC report finishes up in summary that even if we were to achieve net zero now, it would take between 250 and 1,000 years to see an inch of sea level difference.
Sure.
That's it. That's why we're talking about traitorous acts from our leadership against our nation, and taking away our energy is probably one of the worst things that you can ever do, because you're now like the Bismarck. Your rudder's been destroyed. You're going round in circles. And it's only a matter of time before you get pegged off.
I know. Oh, by the way, the research I've read, very quickly, if the whole world went net zero, world temperatures would go down by 0.1 degree centigrade. 0.1.
It's actually an act against the people, and I hope you and Lewis really get into it. I'm looking forward to that show, and hopefully you'll do a November the 5th US election special.
Sure.
We're going to try and get you back on for that November the 5th, sir. We're hoping to go live ourselves on Herr News.
Sure.
And do
I'm not booked yet. I'm actually the 5th of December. 5th of December. Oh, it should
November.
Be okay.
Sorry, November.
5th of November.
Remember.
I might be out on the 5th of November, but let's stay in touch. Let's see what we can do. I can probably dial in from somewhere else.
Dial in from the Bowser. Dial in from the Coach and Horses down Soho when you and
Marcus, how you doing, mate?
Yeah. A bit like a Derek and Clive sketch, won't it? From the Coach and Horses. Jeffrey Bernard is not well.
Sure.
But Dave Atherton is well, and all that remains for us to say to you, sir, dear boy, for coming back onto Community News is God bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all you do for this country.
Thank you
Anyone
very
that
much.
hasn't done so, please tune in to this man, Dave Atherton 20. You won't regret it because you'll find things on there that you won't get, not just in the mainstream media, that you
Sure.
won't get on
Sure.
any other Twitter site in the world.
Sure.
Dave, God bless you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
You're very kind. Thank you so much again. Always a pleasure.